He lived a double life, and what I found at his changed everything forever. My name's Tyler. I'm 26, and until last year, I thought my family was pretty normal. I grew up in a small town in Oregon. My dad, Mike, was a truck driver, always on the road, gone for days or weeks at a time. My mum stayed home, raised me and my younger sister Emma. We didn't have a lot, but we had enough. And we had each other. Dad wasn't exactly warm. He wasn't abusive or anything, just distant. When he was home, he'd watch TV, drink a few beers, go to bed early. He wasn't the kind of dad you'd have deep talks with, but I never questioned it. I figured he was just tired from work. When he passed away in a car accident last October, it hit me harder than I expected. I cried for 2 straight days. The funeral was small. Family, a few co-workers, neighbours. Nothing out of the ordinary until the woman in the red coat showed up. She sat in the very back alone. I didn't recognise her. No one did. She didn't cry, didn't speak to anyone. Just sat there stone-faced, watching everything. When it was over, I saw her place something into the casket before the lid was closed. A small envelope. I assumed it was a letter. Later that night, I couldn't stop thinking about her. Something felt wrong. So, I went back to the funeral home. Don't ask me why, I just had to know what she put in there. I pretended I'd left something behind and asked to see the body one last time. The director hesitated, but eventually agreed. The envelope was still there, tucked under his hands. I took it. What was inside? That's when everything I thought I knew about my dad began to fall apart. Inside the envelope was a photo. A family photo. But not our family. A woman, the one from the funeral, stood beside my father, holding hands. In front of them, 2 teenage boys who looked a hell of a lot like me when I was younger. There was a note too, in her handwriting. They deserved to know the truth, even if you couldn't tell them yourself. I just stood there, heart racing. I couldn't breathe. I took the envelope and left before anyone could stop me. I drove home, locked myself in my room, and stared at the photo for hours. Had my dad had an entire other family? Was this why he was always on the road? Why he was so emotionally detached? I didn't sleep that night. I couldn't. The next morning, I decided to find her. The woman in the red coat. But I had no name, no address, nothing. All I knew was everything I believed about my dad had been a lie. And I was about to find out just how deep that lie went. The next morning, I couldn't shake off the thought of the woman in the red coat. She was still fresh in my mind, but I had no idea where to start looking for her. I had so many questions. What was her relationship with my dad? Was she his mistress? And if so, why did he never tell us? Why hide it for all these years? I spent the day going through old photos, documents, anything that could give me a clue. I found a stack of letters in my dad's old drawer. Some were postmarked from different states, places I didn't recognise. Most of them were addressed to my dad in different handwriting. But there was one that stood out that was signed Lena. Lena. The name stuck with me. I googled it, trying to find anything that could link her to my dad. But I found nothing. I couldn't even find any social media accounts under that name in our town. It was like she didn't exist. I was starting to lose hope when something caught my eye in one of the letters. It wasn't much, just an address. A small town about 150 miles away. It was a stretch, but it was the only lead I had. I decided to drive there. I didn't tell anyone, just packed the bag, grabbed the photo, and left. The drive felt endless. It was raining, the kind of rain that made you feel like the world was pressing down on you. The whole time, I kept thinking about what I might find at the end of this. What if she wasn't even there? What if I was chasing a ghost? Finally, after what felt like forever, I arrived in the town. It was small, quiet. I didn't know what I was expecting, but it wasn't this. I drove through the main street, hoping for a sign, a hint that I was on the right path. Then, I saw a small cafe. The kind you find in old movies. There was a sign that read Lena's Cafe on the window. My heart skipped a beat. I parked the car, took a deep breath, and walked in. The moment I stepped inside, I saw her. She was sitting at the counter, reading a newspaper, just like she'd been at the funeral. The woman in the red coat. Only this time, she wasn't wearing red. She was in a black cardigan, and her hair was pulled back in a loose bun. I approached her slowly, my heart pounding. I had no idea what I was going to say, but I knew I had to confront her. She looked up at me as I stood in front of her. Her expression didn't change. She just stared at me, her eyes cold and calculating, like she already knew who I was. "Can I help you?" she asked, her voice smooth, but there was a sharpness to it. I swallowed hard, holding up the photo. "You were at my dad's funeral." She didn't flinch. "I know. Who are you?" I asked, barely able to get the words out. Her eyes softened for a second, almost like she was considering whether to lie or tell me the truth. Finally, she sighed, leaning back in her chair. "I'm Lena," she said, as though that explained everything. But it didn't. It only raised more questions. "Why didn't you tell me?" Why didn't anyone tell me about you? I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. Lena didn't speak at first. She looked at the photo I was holding in my hands, then back at me. Because it was never supposed to come out. Your father, he had his reasons for keeping this a secret. He didn't want you to know. Know what? I pressed. That he had another family? She nodded slowly. Yes. The weight of her words hit me like a ton of bricks. Another family. How could he do this? How could he lie to lie for 18 years? And what did it mean for me? What did it mean for everything I thought I knew about my own life? Lena stared at me for a long time before finally speaking again. Your father loved you, Tyler, she said, her voice surprisingly gentle. But he wasn't the man you thought he was. He made choices that changed everything, and I can't tell you why he did it, but I can tell you that you were never part of the plan. I didn't understand what she meant by that. Was she implying that my existence was a mistake? That I was just some byproduct of his other life? Before I could ask another question, she stood up and placed a hand on my shoulder. I'm sorry, Tyler, she said, her voice filled with an emotion I couldn't quite place. I'm sorry your father never told you the truth, but you need to know, this is just the beginning. With that, she turned and walked out of the cafe, leaving me standing there, stunned. She was right. I had no idea just how deep this rabbit hole went, but I was about to find out. I sat there in the cafe for a long time, trying to process everything Lena had just said. My mind was racing, trying to piece together the puzzle of my father's life. A second family? A secret so big that even after his death, it was still being kept from me. I left the cafe and walked aimlessly down the street, my feet dragging as I tried to wrap my mind around what Lena had said. I couldn't believe it. It didn't make sense. If my dad really had another family, why didn't I know about them? Why was I left in the dark for so many years? My phone buzzed in my pocket, pulling me out of my thoughts. It was a text from my sister Emma. She had been trying to reach me all day. I hadn't responded, too caught up in my search for answers. Tyler, Mom's looking for you. She says there's something she needs to tell you about Dad's will. It's urgent. Something in my gut told me this wasn't just about a will. I hadn't even thought about it yet. I had been so focused on Lena and the photo that I hadn't thought about the legal stuff, the inheritance, the things my dad had left behind. But there was no way I could go back to her house right now. I was too shaken up, too angry to face anyone. So, I ignored the message and decided to take a walk to clear my head. I walked for hours, letting the cool night air numb the chaos inside me. But as I walked, I couldn't escape the thought of Lena's words. This is just the beginning. What did that mean? Was there more to this than just my dead stubble life? Eventually, I ended up back at the motel where I had stayed overnight. I opened my laptop, trying to dig deeper into the mystery of my father's past. I searched for any connection between my dad and the town, hoping I could find something that would explain Lena's presence in my life. That's when I found it. A list of names I didn't recognize under a mysterious company. I had no idea what it was at first, but as I dug deeper, I realized it was connected to a construction company my dad had worked for in the late 90s. This company had projects in several states, including the one where Lena's cafe was located. It didn't take long to find out that this company was founded by a man named Robert Mason, a name I also didn't recognize. But what stood out was a piece of information on the company's website, buried in the history section. It mentioned that Robert Mason had disappeared in the late 90s. There was no explanation, just a brief statement about his sudden retirement from the company. But why was my dad connected to this? And why did it feel like there was a connection to Lena too? I had no answers yet, but I had a new mission now. I needed to find out everything about Robert Mason and what happened to him all those years ago. Something about this felt like it was all tied together. I didn't sleep that night, poring over every document and website I could find. And then, as the morning light began to creep through the motel blinds, I found something that made my blood run cold. In an old news article from the late 90s, I found a headline that sent a chill down my spine. Robert Mason found dead in suspected murder case. Unsolved mystery. The article detailed how Robert Mason's body was discovered in a remote cabin, his death ruled as a murder, but with no suspects. There was no mention of my dad. But I knew, deep down, that my dad's disappearance from the company and his connection to this mystery were no coincidences. I sat there, staring at the screen, trying to make sense of it all. What did my dad have to do with Robert Mason? And what did his death have to do with my family? I wasn't just looking for answers anymore. I was looking for the truth. And I was starting to think that truth was far darker than I ever imagined. I couldn't rest until I had it. I grabbed my phone and called Emma, telling her to meet me at our mom's house. Whatever was coming, I needed to face it head on. But I knew one thing for sure, this wasn't just about a second family anymore. It was about something much bigger. And I was about to uncover a truth that would shake me to my core. Emma was waiting at our mom's house when I arrived, her face tense with worry. I had barely slept in the past 2 days, and my mind was spinning with everything I'd discovered about my dad and his hidden life. But now, something told me that this conversation with Emma would open up even more of my dad's secrets. "What's going on, Tyler?" she asked, as soon as I stepped inside. Mom says you've been acting strange, and now you're all the way out here without telling anyone where you went. What's going on? I didn't know where to start. I had so much to tell her, but the words stuck in my throat. The photo, Lena, the cafe, Robert Mason, it was all too much to process in one sitting. But I knew I had to tell her everything. She deserved to know. Emma, you're not going to believe this, but Dad had another family, I blurted out, the words hanging heavily in the air. She blinked, clearly taken aback. What? No, what do you mean? I found out after the funeral, I explained, pacing the room. There was this woman, Lena. She showed up at the funeral, and she had a photo of Dad with a woman and two boys who looked like me. They were a family, Emma, and they were connected to Dad's past. Emma's eyes widened. What are you talking about? Dad had kids, another wife? You're not making any sense. I didn't believe it either at first, I said, sitting down next to her. But then I started digging, and there's more to it. Dad wasn't just a truck driver. He was involved with a construction company that's connected to a man named Robert Mason. Robert was found dead in a murder case, and I think Dad knew something about it. I think Dad's whole life was a lie. Emma stared at me, her face a mix of disbelief and confusion. So, what are you saying? That Dad was involved in a murder? I don't know yet, but I need to find out, I replied. There's something else though. I found out that the company Dad worked for has ties to this town, the town where Lena's cafe is, and that's where it gets even stranger. I don't think it's just about a second family. I think Robert Mason's death is connected to everything. For a long time, Emma didn't say anything. She just looked at me, processing the weight of what I just told her. Finally, she spoke. What do you want me to do? I need your help, I said, looking her dead in the eyes. We have to go back to the town where Lena lives. I think the answers are there. Are you out of your mind? Emma said, her voice rising. We're talking about murder here, and you want us to just waltz into the middle of it? I don't know what else to do, Emma, I said, my voice shaking with frustration. This isn't just about our dad anymore. This is about something much bigger. I need to know the truth. We have to know the truth. Emma let out a long, frustrated breath, but after a moment of silence, she nodded. All right, I'll go with you, but you better know what we're getting ourselves into. I'm not playing around with anything dangerous. Neither am I said firmly. But I won't rest until I know why my dad kept all of this from us. We decided to leave first thing in the morning, but that night, I barely slept. I couldn't stop thinking about Robert Mason's murder. I had to know if my dad had anything to do with it. The way Lena had spoken, the way she said, this is just the beginning, it all felt like a warning. I was playing with fire, but I couldn't stop. I had to know. For myself. For Emma. For my dad. The next day, Emma and I packed our things and drove back to the town where it all began. The air was thick with anticipation, each mile that took us closer to the truth. We didn't know what we were about to uncover, but one thing was certain, we were going to find out the truth, no matter how dark or dangerous it turned out to be. We arrived just after noon, and I drove straight to Lena's cafe. My heart was pounding in my chest. I knew what I had to do, and I knew that things weren't going to be easy. But I wasn't prepared for what I would find when I walked through that door. As we entered the cafe, I could feel the weight of the place pressed down on me. It was quite too quiet. There were only a few people scattered at the tables, sipping coffee or reading the paper. Lena wasn't behind the counter, but I could feel her presence in the air, as if she was watching us even though she wasn't physically there. Emma stood a few steps behind me, clearly nervous, her eyes darting around the room. She wasn't as eager to confront Lena as I was, but I knew she was just as desperate for answers. I approached the counter, where a young woman, probably in her early 20s, was cleaning a glass. I gave her a quick smile, trying to mask the unease in my chest. Hey, I'm looking for Lena, I said. The woman looked up, her expression blank. Lena isn't here today, she said, her voice lacking warmth. Can I help you with something? I hesitated for a moment, considering whether to tell her everything. But then I decided it was best to get straight to the point. I need to speak with her. It's important. It's about my father. The woman's face changed slightly, just enough for me to notice. She stopped cleaning the glass and placed it down carefully on the counter. Her eyes flickered to Emma, and then back to me. Your father? Yeah, he passed away recently. I'm Tyler. I showed her the photo of my dad and Lena from the funeral, the one I'd been carrying around like a burden. The woman's eyes widened when she saw the photo. She opened her mouth to say something, but then she stopped herself. Her hand trembled as she picked up the glass again, this time wiping it absently with a rag. I think you should leave. Lena isn't someone you should be looking for. Her voice was low, almost a whisper. That was when I saw it, the subtle panic in her eyes. She wasn't just some employee. She knew more than she was letting on. I wasn't about to leave without answers. Listen, I said, stepping closer. I need to talk to Lena. If she's not here, I need to know where I can find her. This is bigger than just a family secret. This is about my father's life and death. I could see her wrestling with herself, weighing the decision to either tell me or turn me away. Finally, she let out a sigh, her shoulders slumping. You are not going to find her, she said, her voice cracking slightly. And if you do, it's not going to be the answer you're looking for. I stared at her, confused. What do you mean? She looked down at the counter, her hands fidgeting with the rag. Lena, she was never supposed to be part of your life. She's not just some mistress or girlfriend. She was involved in something much darker, something that goes beyond your father. My heart began to race again. I could feel the blood rush to my head. What are you talking about? The woman glanced around nervously, as if checking to make sure no one else was listening. She lowered her voice, leaning in closer to me. Lena and your father weren't just in a secret relationship. Your dad was involved with people who are dangerous, people who didn't want anyone to find out about them, and they didn't want anyone to find out about her either. Who are they? I demanded, gripping the edge of the counter, my breath shallow. Who are these people? She swallowed hard, but before she could answer, the door to the cafe opened with a creak. I turned around, my heart stopping when I saw Lena standing in the doorway. She looked different from the last time I saw her. Her face was pale, her eyes weary, like she had been expecting me. And for a moment, I saw something in her expression that scared me more than anything I had seen so far, regret. She stepped inside slowly, her gaze locking with mine. You should leave, she said, her voice cold, distant. This is not something you want to get involved with. I felt the surge of anger and desperation. No, I'm not leaving until you tell me the truth about my dad, about Robert Mason, about everything. Lena sighed, running a hand through her hair. You think you want the truth, Tyler, but you have no idea what it will do to you. You're better off walking away from this now. I shook my head, refusing to back down. I need to know. I deserve to know. For a long moment, she just stared at me, her eyes filled with a mixture of sadness and something else I couldn't quite read. Then, she finally spoke, her voice barely able to whisper. Your father wasn't just running away from his past. He was running from the people he used to work with, people who don't care about families, or secrets, or lives. Your dad was involved in something that cost Robert Mason his life, and it almost cost yours too. The woman behind the counter was right. This wasn't just about a second family, or a lie. This was about a dark, dangerous world my father had been a part of, a world I had no idea existed. And now, I was in it too. Lena looked at me one last time, her eyes filled with regret. You need to leave now, before it's too late. But it was already too late. I had already crossed the line, and there was no going back. I was going to find out everything, no matter the cost. I stood there, frozen in place, processing Lena's words. She was right about one thing. I had already crossed the line. That there was no way I could turn back now. The desire for answers was consuming me, burning through me like wildfire. My father, Robert Mason, Lena, all of it too, was a web of secrets I had to untangle, no matter what the cost. Lena's eyes were full of warning, but I couldn't let it go. What do you mean? Cost mine too. What are you trying to say? I demanded, my voice rising. Lena's gaze dropped to the floor for a moment, and when she spoke, her voice was softer, almost reluctant. Your father was more than just a truck driver, Tyler. He was working for people who were involved in illegal activities. They were connected to Robert Mason's murder. It wasn't just a random act, and your dad, he was part of it. He wasn't a victim, he was a key player. My blood ran cold. A key player in what? I whispered, though I already feared the answer. Lena shook her head slowly, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. I can't say too much, but these people, these men, they're dangerous. You have no idea the kind of power they have, the things they control. Your father thought he could escape, but he was wrong. They never let anyone go, and now you're involved. I took a step back, the weight of her words sinking in. This wasn't just about a secret family. It wasn't just about my dad being unfaithful or keeping secrets. This was about something far darker, far more sinister. I felt a chill run down my spine, and before I could speak, Emma, who had been standing silently by the door, finally spoke up. Tyler, we need to go. This is too much. This is getting dangerous. These people, whatever they are, they won't stop until they get what they want. Lena glanced at Emma, her eyes filled with something I couldn't quite decipher. She's right. You need to leave. You don't understand what you're dealing with. You have no idea how deep this goes. Your dad was entangled in something you are not ready for. None of us are. I looked at Emma and back at Lena. I wanted to run. I wanted to turn away, to forget all of it and go back to the life I had before. But I couldn't. I couldn't just walk away from the truth. The answers were right here in front of me, and I wasn't going to let fear stop me now. I'm not leaving, I said, my voice firm. I'm not walking away from this. I need to know what happened to my dad. I need to understand why he kept all of this from me, and I won't stop until I do. Lena's face twisted with a mix of pity and something darker, almost like fear. You're making a mistake, Tyler. Once you know the truth, you'll wish you never started this, but I can't stop you. Just know that if you keep digging, it won't just be your father's past you uncover. You'll be digging up a whole world of pain, and they won't hesitate to bury anyone who gets in their way. I didn't care about the danger. I had already lost my father. Nothing could be worse than not knowing who he really was. Lena sighed heavily, and for a moment, I thought she might change her mind, might give me something more. But then, she straightened her shoulders and glanced around, making sure no one else was listening. If you're really determined, then there's one place you need to go, a house, about 30 miles north of here, just past the old gas station. There's a man there, a former associate of your father's. His name is Cole. He'll know more, but I warn you, he's not the kind of man who talks for free. Be prepared. I nodded, my heart pounding. I had no idea who this Cole was, or if he'd even talk to me. But I had to try. I had to learn the truth about my father's life and death. Emma was still standing behind me, looking more nervous than I'd ever seen her. "Tyler, are you sure about this?" she asked, her voice shaky. "This is getting way too dangerous. We don't even know who these people are. What if we get caught up in something we can't get out of?" I could hear the fear in her voice, but I didn't have time to comfort her. I couldn't stop now. "I'm sure, Emma. I have to know what happened to Dad." Lena didn't say anything else, just turned and walked toward the back of the cafe, disappearing through a door that led to the kitchen. I didn't know if she was trying to protect us or if she was simply tired of talking. Either way, it was clear I was on my own now. "Let's go," I said to Emma, grabbing my jacket and heading for the door. I could feel the tension between us, but I knew she wasn't going to let me go alone. She never would. The car ride to the house was filled with silence. I could feel Emma's worry, but I didn't know what to say. I couldn't explain why I had to do this, why I couldn't just walk away. It wasn't just about my father anymore. This was about finding out who he had been. It was about understanding why he had kept these secrets from us. We reached the gas station, then the house Lena had mentioned. There was an old, run-down building at the edge of the woods, just like something out of a bad crime thriller. The windows were boarded up and the place looked abandoned, but I knew better than to assume that. This was it. I could feel it. The answers I was looking for were just inside that house. And whatever I found in there, whatever Cole had to say, was going to change everything. The air around the house was thick with unease. The wind howled through the trees, and the setting sun cast long, airy shadows over the abandoned structure. The whole place felt like it had been forgotten by time. A part of me wanted to turn around and leave to go back to the safety of what I knew. But the other part, the part that had spent days chasing answers, uncovering secrets that felt too big to comprehend, pushed me forward. Emma stood by the car, her eyes darting nervously toward the house. "This doesn't feel right, Tyler," she said, her voice trembling. "We don't even know who Cole is. What if this is a trap?" "I don't know what else to do, Emma," I replied, my voice steady but the unease in my chest growing with each step I took toward the house. "We have to keep going. This is the only lead we have left." I could see that Emma wasn't convinced, but she stayed close behind me as we made our way toward the front door. The house loomed in front of us, dark and foreboding. There was no sign of life, no movement. It was like a place frozen in time, a place my father might have spent years in without anyone knowing. I knocked on the door, my knuckles rapping against the peeling wood. We stood there in silence, waiting. Seconds felt like hours. But just as I was about to turn away, the door creaked open, revealing a man who looked like he'd stepped straight out of a nightmare. He was tall, his face lined with years of hard living. His eyes were cold and feeling. He wore a black jacket that had seen better days, and his hands rough, calloused, gripped the doorframe with a silent power. He didn't say anything at first, just studied us with a look that felt like he was trying to figure out if we were worth his time. "Who are you?" His voice was gravelly, low, like he hadn't spoken to anyone in years. "I'm Tyler," I said, trying to keep my voice steady despite the knot in my stomach. "I'm looking for someone, a man named Cole." The man's eyes narrowed, and for a moment I thought he might slam the door in our faces. But instead, he stepped aside, gesturing for us to enter. "You got the wrong idea, kid," he said, his voice cold and dismissive. "I'm Cole." I froze. This was the man who had been tied to my father's secret life. The man who might have known everything. "Can we talk?" I asked, my voice shaking slightly. I didn't know if I was ready for whatever he was about to say, but I had no choice. Cole didn't speak. He just turned, walked inside, and left the door open. I followed him, Emma trailing behind me like a shadow. The house smelled like old tobacco and something else I couldn't place. The walls were lined with old, yellow pictures, some of which seemed to be from another era, my father among them. "Sit down," Cole said gruffly, motioning to a couple of chairs by a dimly lit table in the corner of the room. I hesitated, but then sat down, my hands clammy as I placed a photo of my dad and Lena on the table. Cole sat across from me, his gaze flicking briefly to the picture before returning to me with an unreadable expression. He didn't ask who I was or why I was there. It was like he already knew. "What do you want, kid?" he finally asked, lighting a cigarette and taking a long drag. "I want to know what happened," I said, barely able to get the words out. "What happened to my dad? Why didn't he tell me anything? Why did he keep his life a secret?" Cole took another drag, his eyes narrowing as he exhaled the smoke slowly. "Your father wasn't a good man," he said quietly, his voice low. "But he wasn't a monster either. He was tangled up with people who don't play by the rules, people who kill you just to cover their tracks." I felt my pulse quicken. "What do you mean? Who are these people?" Cole leaned forward, staring at the table as though weighing whether he should answer. Finally, he sighed. "Your dad didn't just drive trucks, he moved things for people who worked in the shadows, drugs, money, information, anything, and the people who he worked for, they don't leave loose ends. They use you until you're no longer useful, and then they make you disappear." I sat back in the chair, my head spinning. This was worse than I imagined. My father, a man I had admired, was involved in something that I couldn't even begin to understand. So Robert Mason's murder, was that because of my dad? I asked, my throat dry. Cole's eyes flickered for a brief second, but he quickly masked it. Mason got caught up in some of the same things your father did, and when Mason wanted out, they made sure he never left. Your father wasn't directly involved in the murder, but he knew what was going to happen. He knew Mason was going to die, and he did nothing to stop it. I felt like I'd been punched in the gut. My father, my hero, had stood by while someone was murdered. Not just anyone, Robert Mason, the man whose death had started this whole investigation. And my father, who I had trusted, had let it happen. But why didn't he tell us? I choked out. Why didn't he tell me, Eleanor? Cole looked at me, his eyes hardening. Your father was trying to protect you. He didn't want you to get mixed up in this world, but it was already too late. You're involved now. Whether you like it or not, the people he worked for, they're still watching you, and they are not going to stop until they get what they want. My stomach twisted into a knot. What do they want? Cole's lips curled into a grim smile. You're his son, and they don't forget blood. Now, if I were you, I'd start running, but it's probably already too late for that too. The weight of his words sank in, settling in my chest like a stone. There was no turning back. I had walked into a world I couldn't escape from, and now there was no going back.